In an unsurprising twist, which means it's not really a twist at all, the Yule cat, or the Jólakötturinn, Jólaköttur, has its roots in a kind of unethical and commercial historical motivation. What does that look like then, right? This apparently could go back as far as the Dark Ages, and it seems to be deeply connected with the Icelandic work ethic. Apparently the work ethic in Iceland runs deep. Some reports say that they are the European country that worked the most overtime, basically ever, when you compare it to other countries. So they work hard, they're proud of working hard, and they are teaching their children to work hard. And so you have to ask yourself, how do you instill this kind of severe work ethic into young children? Well, you create a giant cat. A Yule cat, a cat that if you do not work hard enough and earn enough money to buy yourself a new article of clothing, it will literally come out of the mountains just to eat you. Remember, that was one of two options, but for this particular discussion, let's just go ahead and assume that the Yule cat is going to take the most severe possible route. I was doing some reading of an article by Adria Gibbs, and she mentions that the Yule cat was also great for adults, and that it existed as this kind of threat that could come out of the mountains and eat you if you weren't working hard enough and you weren't getting basically enough wool processed in your daily work as well. So not only did you have to deal with the Yule cat as a child who might come and eat you, but then you get to be an adult and the Yule cat is still there, still looming as a possible punishment for your lack of work ethic or your lack of production. And it may not be an American tradition, but man, do we have this problem in every single country. How do we make people work hard to contribute to a commercial system? Now, granted, the Yule cat's pretty creative and pretty interesting, so I almost kind of wish I lived in Iceland. So if I was going to be manipulated in this kind of way, at least it was creative and at least it was a cat that I could and possibly die. Even if we go back to the less severe possibility with the Yule cat that maybe he just comes and eats all of your food, what we do know is that the Yule cat is really not picky. And he's vicious, and he's giant, and he's from the snowy mountains, so he's probably not in a good mood. He's just like this hangry, giant cat that lives in not the greatest conditions, and so he basically just wants to tell you that you're gonna get out of life essentially what you put into life, and if you don't put in enough, I'm going to eat you, or I'm gonna eat your food, or I'm gonna generally make your life miserable, or I'm either just going to end your life. Now, given what a consumerist kind of world we've become in modern times, the Yule cat almost gets darker as you get into the way the world works now, which is something that Adria Gibbs points out in her article as well, is that basically you've got a ton of people now that are homeless or out of work, and that could be for reasons that have literally nothing to do with them. In fact, a lot of the time, it has nothing to do with them. It has to do with the way our society has now been built up and the way accessibility works and the way systemic problems continue to put people in those situations, even people who have that inspired Icelandic work ethic that maybe the Yule cat was meant to foster originally if it did not already exist in a person. In an effort to make the Yule cat maybe still relevant, Adria Gibbs suggests that maybe the Yule cat is there to encourage selfless acts, maybe encourage you to be a little kinder to people. You have to wonder how that is going to translate in modern times, and that is, I guess, one way to try to move into a new direction without essentially telling people that if the world beats them down and they end up without a job or unable to produce much or unable to put a lot into the world, they're just going to get eaten by a Yule cat. I suppose that seems unfair, so maybe we try to adjust the narrative to be less unforgiving in modern times. Because the Yule cat is so important though, and it has so much history, there's definitely a lot more to dive into, including the fact that an Icelandic poet actually penned a poem about this Yule cat, about this Jólakötturinn, and I can't wait to expose you to that information as well in a future video.